book, and especially if you're considering going through this yourself. It was a great read. Lania, thank you so much for coming back again. And previously we talked about a little bit about known donors versus anonymous donors. We discussed sibling registries and all kinds of information. But I would like to touch a little bit more on known donors versus anonymous donors and the process of that, how somebody could go through that. So your process was with anonymous donor. Could you tell us how you went through that with the bank, the sperm bank, to do that?
Yes. So I first called, and they didn't want me to work directly with them to place an order. They wanted me to go through the clinic. So I went through my clinic, and they had someone in the clinic who specifically worked with contacting the donor, the sperm bank, and doing the orders for the clients or their patients. They sent me, they gave me a lot of paperwork. They gave me a catalog, like a physical catalog, but they told me that they probably had updated options online. And at that point, a lot of the paperwork they handed to me, I read it, I had to read it and sign it. There were things I thought were strange or I didn't necessarily agree with. But again, that wasn't something I could change. For example, the not being, I wasn't allowed to contact the donor for any reasons. And it's been a while. I mean, it's been over 12 years, well over 12 years, at least 13 probably, since I went through this process, and I do not remember what the contract said or didn't say. I'm trying to, remember some things off the top of my head. But I found it uncomfortable that they restricted me in ways I didn't want to be restricted. But I didn't feel that there was an option. I wanted to proceed with the process, and I just went ahead and signed the papers and returned to my clinic, and my clinic placed the order with my credit card. And they received the vials. They stored it for me until I found out it was cheaper for my clinic to store them than for the sperm bank to store the vials. And they were ready in my clinic when I went for insemination.
I'm sorry, were you given the option to go with a known donor, or did the clinic?
The clinic had what is called known open donors. California Cryobank calls them open donors versus anonymous donors. And anonymous donors, they don't give the bank the right to being contacted when the child turns 18. Open donors, the child can contact the bank or possibly contacting the donor when they turn 18. So I'm very curious. For me, it wasn't an option, or I didn't know enough details, if it existed back then, to go with someone that you could meet in person and discuss, ideas. So I would love to hear more about it from you if you're going through that process.
Yeah, I'm going through with a known donor. And what's interesting for me is, even though your situation was 12 years ago, I was not really given a choice to go with a known donor when I was at the fertility clinic. I've gone to a few fertility clinics because actually the first one was not friendly to known donors. They did not want you to go with a known donor. They wouldn't even tell you it was an option. All they did was say, oh, well, you want to be a single mom, you're doing this without a partner, and say yes. And so they said, okay, well, here's the information on the sperm banks. I was never given any other opportunities, no information, nothing. And then later on, I found out more about known donors. And then I kind of did my own research. And then I went with another clinic that was a bit more friendly with it. But it's kind of tricky because I feel like the women that go in and they have a boyfriend, they have a spouse, they have a fiance that can actually go in as their donor, whatever you want to call them, their special significant other that goes with them. I feel like they don't have to jump through as many hoops as somebody that is going with a known donor. I feel like if you have a known donor, they expect you to jump through all these tests and paperwork, and they can actually, the clinics can actually refuse to treat you if you go with a known donor. So each state is different in their requirements, and each clinic has its own set of rules that they kind of go with here. So I really didn't feel like I was given an option at my first clinic. I felt very pressured to go with a sperm bank, but it really has to do with what you feel comfortable with. And I didn't feel comfortable with that. You know, I felt like it was very restrictive, and kind of like what you're talking about. You can't contact the donor. You can't get medical information. You know, what are you going to do? What if your kid needs that information? And kids have questions. And for me, that was important to me.
Yes.
They could have those answered. Now, I know on our last part, you talked about sibling registry and how you thought that was a good thing because your children could actually connect with the other children that have the same donor. And in that way, they can have their questions answered. But in some situations, depending on the kind of donor you select, you don't have that option. And with some known donors, they actually say they do not want to be a part of the life. They do not want you contacting them for questions. So even though some people are known donors, they still have it to where they don't want to be contacted, like they might at a sperm bank. So it's a really strange situation to find yourself trying to weigh the pros and the cons, and what do you look for, and what's important to you, and what would be the best for your kids. And unfortunately, we're just kind of trying what we think would be best, but we have really no idea what the situation is going to turn out to be when they're older. You know, will they need that information? Won't they? And sometimes we're pressured into doing things we feel that we don't want to do. And we're kind of in the situation, at least I'm speaking for myself. I'm in the situation because this is my last opportunity, you know, and I want my baby, and this is the route I have to go through. And I feel like if doctors pressure someone to use sperm banks, then they don't know about the other options. I wouldn't feel comfortable if people were pressuring just for known donors, but you really have to do your checkup on all of this stuff, because
Yes.
when I looked at the known donor, they have apps for it now. I remember I was laughing when I got on because I thought, this is so obtuse, this is so strange, you know, going on an app to try to find a donor. And you know, I felt like they could be lying and telling me anything they wanted to say, and I just have to assume that it's correct. But if someone does go with a known donor, they really need to have proof of STD. They've been checked for that, that they really need to provide extensive information. So when I was going through that, I really ruled all that out. Did you have a list that you just sat down with and came up with what was most important to you in a donor?
I had some characteristics. I mostly found out what was important to me as I was as I was trying to do the search. I knew that health was important. Looks were important, but they were not the first thing. Smarts was important, and that was near the top of my priority. And for some reason at that point, I really wanted him to be Christian. I wanted a donor with the same, similar things to what were important to me, because I thought I visualized that kid wanted to meet for coffee with that donor and talking, and if their points of view clashed, they might not get along. I just wanted an easy, you know, getting to know each other, liking each other. So I didn't want things that were very different. I chose within my ethnicity, although I was open to other ethnicities or races. I was open to things like, you know, body type, blood type. I could not care less.
Right.
Yes. So some things were very important to me, others were not. Psychological, if I didn't have a way to screen them for anything psychological, but by reading their profile, if I had something that suddenly became suspicious, I would list it either as a yellow flag or a red flag, and I would either choose or discard based on those options.
I had a very long list. I have it somewhere. It's just front and back page of questions, and the things that topped my list were health, like what you said.
Health, yes, is the most important.
Common
Yes,
trait.
because yes, we want our children to be healthy. And then you mentioned something about being able to contact the donor and knowing their health. My children did end up having health uh, concerns. I had a lot of concerns that I needed more information. So when my kids were 3 years old, I contacted the bank because I had already come to the realization that there was speech delay, and I had gotten them into speech therapies, but I wanted to know if it was common in the donor's family because it wasn't in mine. And one of my boys had some characteristics of autism, and I didn't want to jump to a conclusion because it wasn't an obvious a description or definition of the autism characteristics. But I didn't want to jump into a diagnosis for my kid until I knew where this was coming from. So I contacted the bank, and I tried to get the bank to let me ask him these questions,
Mm-hmm.
and they didn't agree to that. So I told them, well, then you ask him the questions and bring it in for more tests, and they said they would. But then I started, I just left it at that. They're responsible people. They're going to contact him. They're going to ask him the questions. They're going to
Right.
get back to me. And then I stayed in touch. A couple of days later, they didn't give me an answer. They hadn't, heard back from the donor. And then a couple of weeks later, and nothing. A few months later, nothing. And years passed. And I more or less, after a while, stopped being what I thought was annoying. But now, years later, I understand that my questions, I wasn't nagging, or it wasn't bugging anyone. I feel I have a right to that information,
It's
and
your
my
child's
kids
health.
definitely have a right because their doctors, for example, they needed surgery when they were 3.5 for
Mm.
getting ear tubes implanted in the ears. It was a minor surgery, but they needed regular anesthesia, and the doctors were asking me life and death questions about their health history
Oh,
in order to decide what anesthesia to use. And because I have, yes, a bit of a medical background, I know that, how essential it is at the time of the surgery to have the right information. I did not have that information, and the bank didn't help me to get it. And then when when they were 6 years old, one of my sons was diagnosed with cancer. And at that point, I contacted the bank again, the same people that I had been in touch with before. And I'm not talking about any bank receptionist who answers the phone. I'm talking about I was in touch with their genetic specialist.
mhm.
Um, and I beg this time, contact the donor, give my kid a chance to, get to know him, ask him more information about health. Is this
Right.
coming, are these genes in the doctor's family? And they told me, well, they're just as the donor during their next scheduled appointment, which it's been again 11 years. Their scheduled
Oh,
appointments is every 2 to 3 years. I'm not sure what the bank says now, but they didn't. They never really reached out to the donor and get back to me with any updated health
so
information.
let me make
They
sure I
never
have this
have.
right. They only meet with the donor every 2 or 3 years at the bank that you were with, and you told them that your child had cancer and
Yes.
needed help,
No,
and they would not contact the donor until the next
it
meeting.
seems that it's not that they meet. They don't necessarily meet. It seems that they request that the donors provide updated information or comes for a checkup every 2 to 3 to 5, I don't know how many years. But if the donor doesn't, then they don't find out any more information. Uh, I think that what they did was they sent a generic, a generic card to the donor, letting him know that he should call the bank, not letting him know that a family was requesting information, requesting contact, or anything like that. And yes, there was nothing. They provided nothing back to me that would help me.
That's
I cursed
terrifying.
my child's cancer treatment without knowledge of half of their genes or half of their health history.
Is your child okay now?
Yes, he went through 3 years of chemo, very harsh treatment, because his cancer has spread to the blood and the bone marrow. So he had stage 4 cancer, basically. And yes, he went through a lot of very delicate situations. Yeah, he lost his hair completely twice, but he's a survivor. He's a strong kid. He wanted to stay with mommy. There were nights in which I would hug him to sleep, and we would wake up still hugging each other because I was afraid, and he was afraid that if I let him go, he wouldn't be there in the morning. Yes, that's one of the harsh things. And I left all of that for my second book
Yeah.
because it was a little bit hard for me to touch on.
Well, thank God that he's okay now.
Yes.
I mean,
Yes.
really, I can't imagine you going through that. You fought to become a mother. You fought during pregnancy and you were still fighting. It's like you've had all these different obstacles no matter, and you're always trying to choose your children and what's best for them. And the fact that the sperm bank didn't seem to take that seriously, in my opinion, it's really bothersome. I mean, that's your child's life there, and they're supposed to be helping people with families, not
Yes.
more.
They just care about you until you give them the money. You purchase the vial, and that's it. That's all they want. They don't think about that growing child needing more questions answered.
Wow.
I think I'm very, very lucky too.
Were you able to get some of those questions answered whenever your children met the other siblings from the same donor? Did anybody else have similarities?
None of the other children have had cancer, but the curious thing is that whenever they have a swollen neck or swollen anything, they immediately contact me, and they made me ask my child's oncologist, what can we do? Is it cancer? How do we know? They're all worried that their child could be next.
Yeah. And you can't hear from the donor through the bank to find out anything. No. Well, I'm glad
So it might be different, and I'm sorry about the pressure that the doctors are putting on you to go the regular route, but it's not necessarily the best option. It's not. It might not be a bad option for everybody, but it has its big cons, and that you have to consider as well. So maybe looking back, you'll be able to tell other women, other girls, what your experience was like. Right now, you just have to go through it and learn little by little, step by step.
Wow. Well, everyone hopes that it doesn't come to a situation like that, but
yes,
is just try to get as much information as we can at the time that we have it, and sometimes we don't have it. But that was a consideration for me. Big thing was the health with the donor, and I felt a little silly. It was like a job interview. I would put them on web.
Oh yes, you have to.
And I'm asking them questions if like I'm invading their life. What is your grandparents' health? How long did they live until? What about your parents? What are their?
Wonderful that you get that information.
Yeah. What are their intellectual
and that if
abilities?
You need more, at some point he can maybe get you in touch with one of his parents who asks about a specific condition that there may be. Or right now when he's young, he's perfectly healthy, so he can tell you wonders about his health, but he doesn't know what he's going to get after he's 30. Or a new condition that popped out in his family because one of his parents or one of his uncles died from something that you need to know.
And this might be an irrational fear on my side of things, but I have a fear that, the donor that I've chosen, will he change his phone number and not his information, and then when I do need to contact him about some health situation, I can't reach him, because you're just kind of relying on that network to connect you, the phone, the text, the internet. But if a donor decides that they don't want any contact, even though they did originally choose a known donor, it's over. That's it. You can't get any information.
Yes. So I tried to ask the bank. I tried to get them to tell me what if they were using an old email from the donor, and they assured me, no, we have ways of contacting them. We have their license information, and I don't know if they had their social security numbers as well. Maybe you should look, ask the known donor for that kind of information. So they assured me that they could reach out to him, that they could find him, And then now they say that it just hasn't reached back to them. So I don't know. They will not say they sent an email to what address. So, if it's an old college address, if
Mm-hmm.
the email bounced back, they will not tell me, because a no response, they take it as a no. And
Mm-hmm.
well, to me, a no, they won't even tell me if he said no, or if it's a no response. They won't. It's
Yeah.
too much of a blockade of
So the
information,
bank is
and
just
it's
trusting
not.
that the donor is going to send common updated information, and they may have forgotten. You don't know what's happened in between. Now, something else that you've been.
He might be thinking, if he receives a generic a message, he might be thinking, oh, they just want me to donate again, and I don't want to. So
Mm-hmm.
I don't have to answer that. They might not realize that this person is looking for real information, that that it's about a kid, that a family wants contact, or a family really wants to find out if there are any concerns, any issues. Maybe I know for a fact that they don't train their donors. They don't provide enough information for the donors, and that it's a good thing for them if there's no contact among each other,
Yeah.
among both parties, the client and the donor, because then they're liable for anything that comes up and they did not rule out.
Mm. So, something else that you had mentioned previously was about sibling registries. How you opted in on doing that. Now, with the known donors, uh, they're I mean, you can try to create one online from what I understand, but there's no regulation with the siblings, or how many kids are being conceived by the same donor. So you're just kind of trusting the known donor. So that's kind of a negative aspect of it. Whereas the bank, they say that they keep up with the tallies and the rates of everything. But of course, that same donor could go to multiple banks. So
But they don't. They're not very good at it.
right. And
Yes,
well,
the
with
donor
the
can
known
go
donor,
to different banks, and they don't make people, or they don't try to contact the clients to find out if there was a live birth or not. So they
mhm.
don't keep records on how many kids born from each donor. If they don't keep the records, then there's no way of knowing to how many families they sold to, or to how many families already have kids from that donor.
Yeah. Well, with the known donor, it's kind of scary because even though I've chosen my donor, and I'll have to go into this in a minute. It's been the craziest process, but I have my now donor, and he's donated to a few other families, but he could, tell me he's only donated to this many when really in reality it's 100 something. You just don't know. And they might say it's their last one, but you hear crazy stories about known donors that they don't charge. And so, women are in dire situations and they want a children and they have no other choice. And so they go with that donor. And then they find out, there's cases they have 200 offspring out there and you can't regulate to see if there's any health issues, what's going on.
Mhm.
It's insanity.
Yes.
So,
There are there are donors. There are family clusters registering the donor siblings, and because the owners of the donor registry have kept records. They know that some donors have well over 100 children in their family groups. I call it sibling groups. So their sibling groups are more than 100. And there was a nice documentary. I should give you a link to a documentary about a donor that had well over 100 known kids born from his donations.
and,
Yes, and
you
how
know,
that affected his life.
you almost have to wonder. I know, and I've wondered this. Do they have a psychological complex? Some of these donors, where you hear
Yes.
donated to 200, 300 different people. Do they just want to procreate? They just want to have the master gene,
Mhm.
that that overpowers
Yes.
all these others. And so you just kind of wonder about their psychological nature on some of them. Now, I know if you go with a known donor through the fertility clinic that I'm with now, they are required to go through psychological examinations. You're required to go through a psychological examination. All these hoops that they would not make people that have spouses or boyfriends or fiancés to go through. They make you and the donor go through. So it's pretty interesting.
That's probably something new. That's probably something new. It's not something that was, provided or was done by the banks when I was looking for a donor. That's something unheard of for me, but I think it's wonderful that they're providing that now.
Now, my first, I had another donor before this one lined up, and he had changed his mind. And actually, the first donor that I had gone through this process because I felt comfortable with him. I'd actually known him. I'd been friends with him for like 10 years. And he had brought it up to me and said, okay, so this is a possibility. And I'd already gone through with all the testing and everything. And then he changed his mind when it came to the point of they wanted to do psychological examinations on him and all this in-depth stuff. And he wasn't nearby to be able to do that. So it became very difficult. And I think that's why a lot of people feel pressured to go with the sperm banks, because you don't have to jump through all those hoops. Whereas with known donors, they kind of force you to go through that. I'm not saying it's necessarily a negative thing, but it can be, and it can cause more hindrances and more frustration. Now, something else I did want to talk about, we discussed a bit about the sibling and registry and the process of known donor versus anonymous donor. Something else we haven't talked about is how we break the news to our family and friends. What was that like for you?
I first sat down with my parents. I really wanted their blessing. I had already made the decisions that I was going to go to become a mother this way. But my parents have always been good with me. They have always been, we've been close, and there was no reason for me not to let them know ahead of time. So I just sat down with them. I kind of mentioned it to my mother over the phone, and she was always reluctant. She would tell me, you have a child when you have a father to give that child. But sometimes she would just joke about it, it's about time, you're going to lose your chance. Or she would tell her friends, oh, she says she wants to be a single mother. So when it came to it, I sat them both down, and I started with my mother, and she said, well, if you're going to do it this way, at least tell your father so that he doesn't think it's me putting ideas in your mind. I called my father to the same table and sat him down, and I told him, and he just worried about, me having a secure job for long enough. And he's always had one, but I just don't know if that happens anymore, that you have the same job for 30 years. I don't know that many people that have that have ever had that. So, I had to take my chances with that. And other than that, he didn't talk too much. So I had to ask him specific questions like, are you okay with this? Would you approve of me or not approve? I asked him his blessing, but I asked him, would you support me doing this? Would you support my choice to do this? And he said, oh, absolutely. And for me, that was a big relief. So it's funny, I always fear what my grandparents would say as well, because they helped to raise me, and I'm very close to them. And my grandmother didn't like it, and she called me and she made sure she told me all the reasons why. Well, my grandfather didn't talk to me directly, but I heard that my grandfather said, she has a good head on her shoulders, she knows what she's doing. That was it. So it's amazing that the most supportive people in my family were the two men, two very classical men figure in my family. My brother didn't like it though. My brother he just thought it was a tacky thing to do. Same thing with an ex, who thought it was just beneath me to do something like that. I don't think so. Sometimes I think I was meant to be a mother this way. It was meant to happen this way.
But,
So a lot of family members, including my aunts and some cousins, called me to completely let me know they didn't approve. And one
oh.
of my best friends, one of my Catholic best friends, told me too that, and once I was pregnant, she said that maybe you should give it up for adoption because
No.
she had been born. Yes, I'm like, no, there's no chance. Um, she just thought it was more ethically correct to give it for adoption than raising myself because he had been conceived that way. But no, I completely wanted to have my children, and I felt okay with myself doing it this way. I just had to be. I felt I had to be patient with everybody else, and in the end, my grandmother started calling me, or whenever I called my grandmother, she would ask me, has it happened? Or any news? And I would always, because I tried for over a year to get pregnant, I had 8 failed IUIs. So I had to tell her, no, nothing's happened. So one time I called her, told her, it's done. And she's done what? Well, it's done. She's like, are you pregnant? I'm like, yes. Oh, glory to God, hallelujah. She was so happy. Oh, yes.
You see,
yes, with the babies here, they were all crazy. All of them crazy. The friend that asked me to give them into adoption became my son's godmother.
wow.
So, yes.
See, I
They
think
all love the kids.
our loved ones want what's best for us, but they have an idea of what's best for us. So if it doesn't match,
yes,
confused and they're hesitant with it. But I was actually terrified to talk to my mom about it. I had done a lot of research before I talked to my mom, and I mentioned it to her. And when my first donor fell through, I'd already gone through the testing, and she was kind of on the sideline, very neutral, wasn't really engaging in it. And then, once she realized I was going to go with a known donor that I'd known for a while, she felt a bit more comfortable, after time, because it's already been a year-long process, and I still haven't been able to do the BF yet. It's very long, but my mom, I remember I was crying because the first donor had changed his mind with all the testing required in the clinic. Oh. And my mom had said, well, sometimes some people just aren't meant to be moms. And that really hit me hard. I just started crying even more because it's like, so because we don't have a spouse, we're not supposed to be mothers. Because it doesn't line up with somebody's idea, we're not supposed to be mothers. It doesn't make sense. Yes. You and I, we both come from, it sounds like very strong Christian backgrounds. And so it seems like that's also trying to break down a barrier of their preconceived idea of what's acceptable for children and what isn't. And I was very surprised when my pastor was very open-minded about it, because you hear it's man and woman getting married, having a child, and okay, well now, Danielle at the church is going to be going through this process. How can we support her emotionally with that? And with wanting to go through this journey, we really need that extra support, because we're not getting it from a spouse. We're not getting it from a boyfriend, a fiance, what have you. So we really just have us and our parents, if we have parents, or us and our single friends. And I found that our friends, my girlfriends, a lot of them are divorced with children, or they're married with children. And I have a few that are just single, but none of them really understand because they haven't really been in this situation. So it's entirely unique.
Yes, it's difficult. And it sounds to me, when you said that your mother was very neutral, it sounds to me that was a very good thing to be for the first time that you mention it. Not approving, not disapproving. It's just a little bit of a shock that I have to go through. And of course, she changed her mind completely because she cried when you lost the chance, or you lost, like when you were not able to go through with the first donor. It's incredible. Oh, I can tell she's gonna be a great grandmother. Yeah.
Oh, well,
yes.
It was
She's
cute.
already gone through. She's gonna be there for you, I bet.
I hope so. I mean, at one point, she was neutral, and then it was kind of negative, which I understand she was trying to adjust to it, but she had said something to the effect of, "What will people think?" And
Yes.
her thought process. She explained it to me. She said, "Well, Danielle, they're going to think that you're not good enough to get married, and so you're having to have a child this way." There's still that old mindset, like,
Mm-hmm.
Danielle can't
Yes.
demand to marry her, so now she's having to go through this, and they're thinking, well, she spent too much time trying to work on a career or going to school or doing this, and now, she has to do it this way, almost like it's some sort of punishment for
Mm-hmm.
putting career first or trying to develop in your life. So it's really odd. But after that conversation with my mom, I remember we were at the store, and she just wanted to go look at the baby stuff. And it was adorable. So she started
She's already young. It's
yeah.
gonna happen. Let her go shopping for the baby.
So she said, "What about this or this?" And I said, "Well, Mom, I don't know. This is a long process. Like, it could take 2 more years of actually trying with IVF or something. You don't know." And she's like, "Well, still,
This is the way I think about that. Let her and go ahead, get everything that you dream of as well. Just don't stop yourself. Go ahead and buy it because you're determined to be a mother. So it doesn't matter if it's gonna happen in 9 months or in 10 years. It doesn't matter. That child's gonna use them. You know, you can go ahead and get the crib that you dream of. One of the issues is who's going to help you lift it. You're going to build it yourself. Then you better do it now, not when you're pregnant, and not when you're expecting the baby, or when the baby's here and you have to hold the baby and use only one hand to screw the parts. That's not going to work.
Yeah.
The other thing is clean up the room, which is not something to do when prepare the room, the space for that baby. When you're pregnant, you can't do that. You can't even paint the room. So do it now while you're still thinking about it. When you become pregnant, you have to focus on the fact that the baby's already here inside of you, and you have to take care of yourself and that baby. And you can go ahead and keep on going to the mall as after COVID, and buying things online. But it's a good thing, a really good thing, that you don't have to do it all in just 9 months or all at once, all the things that the baby requires and needs. So go ahead and start preparing for it. And even if you can't get pregnant, but eventually you're turning to adoption, you're going to have that space already available when you do the home study and the social worker comes in, and you can show them this is going to be the baby's room.
Yeah.
If you're determined to be a mother, you will be a mother. The thing is having your options open and having a little bit of patience.
Now, can I ask, I don't remember because it's been about a week or two since I read your book, but how long was your process from deciding that you wanted to do this and going to see your doctor and actually having your kids?
Yeah. So I made the decision on a birthday, so that I finally, that was after, that birthday that I picked up the phone and decided to call to get the sperm. I had already gone through my OB-GYN who referred me to the RE and done the test that they required. So without counting that, from the time that I picked up the phone to call the sperm bank to the time that I got pregnant, it was like a year and a month.
Wow.
Because 1 year later, exactly 1 year later, after I started the process, I had my other birthday, and at that point I had started IVF. And for my birthday, my brother took me out to dinner to a Mexican restaurant, and I ordered a margarita. And I felt guilty about drinking my last alcoholic drink because I wasn't pregnant, but I was already taking medications for IVF. So I was wondering if I was doing something I shouldn't do. I'll always remember that. So I ended up getting the embryos implanted about a month after that. In the meantime, I went through 4 IUIs. They found a fibroid. They allowed me to continue with IUIs. I was hoping that I would get pregnant without surgery, but after 8 IUIs, I gave up and I had the surgery to remove a fibroid. And after I got the fibroid removed, I decided to just jump into IVF. I decided not to continue doing IUIs. I was completely ready, no more doubts in my mind that I wanted to do things this way. And I'm very lucky. I feel very, very lucky that I got my 2 babies.
Yeah. Oh, sweet. They're adorable. Thank you so much for sharing your story. And did I hear you say that you have a second book that you're going to be releasing?
In my mind, at least.
Okay.
I have to sit down and write it. Hopefully,
well, please let us know.
2020 will allow me to get it started at least.
Well, please let us know if you do that or when you do that. That way we can dive into that as well. And for those of you that have not checked out my YouTube channel, I'm committed to going through the good, the bad, the ugly, and all the crying through the process. So see the beginning video of where I was very nervous, I had no idea what I was doing, and trying to go through the thought process, to when COVID caused me to cancel my flight for my procedure. So you'll see all of that stuff. And I'm committed to keep going through that. So please subscribe to the channel and like and share with your loved ones. And if you're going through this process, we'll send you lots of love. Thank you so much, Lania. I appreciate you for being here.
It has been a pleasure talking to you and sharing this information. Big hugs. And that's my voice calling.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Bye.